Excuse me, go ahead.
For example, Victorine Hollingsworth, when she came out, uh, I think was her name Catherine.
Schroeder, Catherine
No, no,
Schroeder.
no. The other one that came out with Victorine was was it Madison? I forget what her
No,
Madison, I think.
Oh, Catherine Madison came out. She was the one who brought the audio tape out on March 2nd. So she would have already been out. But another woman did come out with Victorine Hollingsworth, and I can't think of her name right now.
I know they were both older women, but Victorine was not in great health, and so she needed assistance to come out. But her brain was pretty clear. And when she came out, they interviewed her, and she actually wrote some type of letter, to my understanding, to David Koresh, stating that she knew what he was doing. She knew she was not happy with his involvement with children and wives, and she was pretty upset about some of those things. And so, to my understanding, she actually wrote a letter back into him. But it's my understanding, she told the agents that were interviewing her that the actual plan, the day that they were talking about coming out after the recording was aired, was for Koresh to be brought out in a stretcher by some of the men, and he would have hand grenades underneath him, and the children would be walking along beside the stretcher as they all came out, and some of the other adults would be further behind the stretcher. And the plan was that as agents approached them and the agents got close enough for the children to reach in and grab the hand grenades out from underneath him and try to blow up as many agents as they could. And that was supposedly what the plan was when he was going to come out and surrender. And God told him, not today. So that's what my understanding of what she said that plan was.
Yeah.
So that didn't make them very happy either when they heard that was what the plan was. But that leads into the teachings of martyrdom and resurrection and afterlife. So
yeah, if something like that had been implemented, it would have basically be more or less a suicide by cop scenario. And Catherine Schroeder, she came out, I think, on March 11th, and she and Victorine both testified in the criminal trial of some of the Branch Davidian adults. And what she said, yes, that David Koresh will be carried out on a stretcher. The men would be armed and draw gunfire from the agents. I didn't know where the children fit into it, so that's
I believe
interesting
that.
information.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Catherine's story was, but I believe that about the children and the hand grenades was Victorine's
Yeah.
explanation. And that's not so much, you can describe that as a suicide by cop, but that's not. That is a murder situation and a martyrdom situation. There was an intent to kill agents with that plan, and suicide by cop, you're basically just intending to get yourself killed because you don't have the wherewithal or the nerve to kill yourself. So you want the police to kill you. So I understand your comment there that they would be getting killed, but they were more intent based on that plan of taking out as many agents as they could before they were killed. So it's a little different.
And what Catherine Schroeder added to the scenario was that the women who did not currently have children, her children had already been sent out. But so women who were in the building who didn't have children, they would gather in groups of 5, and one of them would have a hand grenade and blow up blow themselves up in small groups.
Mhm.
So, and do you know if Catherine Schroeder if she revealed that when she came out and she was debriefed? Did you hear anything about that?
I do not know whether she revealed that at that time or perhaps later on, because I think there were ongoing interviews with her. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't think she had much of anything to provide initially. She was more interested in her children's situation. Um, but I don't know for sure what all she told or when she told them that. I I believe that the information she told them at the time was the truth from her perspective. Um, I know that she has since kind of waffled a little bit in talking to some of the other survivors that are now grown up that were children at the time and telling her story, but I think that's more of a peer pressure kind of thing to save face. But
Well, actually, I interviewed Catherine Schroeder in Florida, and those interviews are on my YouTube channel, and she hasn't changed her testimony.
no, I
As
know
she
that,
is.
but in just person to person conversation with other Branch Davidians as well as the children who are now adults, I think that there's just been some loose conversation where she's kind of backtracked, at least based on some of the things that they said. And the same thing with Graham Craddock. He's, just from some of the things that I've seen them say about some of the things that he said, he's kind of tried to soften the blow of his testimony as well, making himself look a little bit better. Which to me, being honest about things makes you look better than trying to make yourself something that you're not, or make the situation something that it wasn't.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to interview Graham, but when I see him and of course he did not testify in the trial. Only Catherine Schroeder and Victorine Hollingsworth testified in this trial, but Graham gave a testimony to a grand jury. And anyway,
And
but
he
well,
also did some interviews later on for the media that he told about his involvement. And when he came out with at least one hand grenade and a handgun, and found a little area where he said that he was hiding at when they took him into custody. So, uh, and who knows? I mean, there's a lot of people that said that they didn't fire any shots, and Catherine said she didn't fire any shots. Um, it's neither here nor there because a lot of people were firing something. So, there was a lot of rounds being fired from inside coming out, and I have no. I'm not here to debate who was shooting which direction, but you know, it's kind of hard to fabricate all of those cartridges that were found during the evidence gathering stage. So I
so,
know,
so it sounds like Victorine Hollingsworth, as soon as she came out, told about the plan to carry David Koresh out and do something to kill the agents, and then probably draw gunfire or blow themselves up with grenades, something along those lines.
and
In
I may
that
be
sense,
confused. I may be confused about it being the children versus the women. That's certainly possible, but there again, I'm not going from firsthand information. So
yeah. But if David Koresh decided to wait, if God told, he said that God told him to wait and not come out at that time, that's actually a good thing.
right,
That they didn't carry out that plan.
right.
Um, so I think anyway, but ultimately, looking at the big picture and all the events of the siege, that was very good that they didn't carry out that plan. But
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It's very good that they didn't carry out the plan. It's very bad that they had a plan to begin with.
mhm,
So looking at it from the field commander and law enforcement perspective, that's basically a double-edged sword. They're lying to you. They're telling you one thing, they're doing something else. And in planning to do something else, they were planning on doing a lot of damage. And then on the flip side of that coin, they decided to stand down. Well, at the time that took place, that we were under the impression they were all going to peacefully surrender. So yes, it is a good thing that they didn't carry out the violence. But on the other end of that perspective, it was not a good thing that they didn't follow through with what they had promised us, and apparently that promise was a lie to begin with. They intended to create a violent situation, but it turned out to be a lie in a lot of different ways. So yes, it's a good thing they didn't harm anyone, but it's just not. I wouldn't raise it up on the level any higher than it is. So it's not a good thing, period. So that they didn't do what they promised they would do.
So during the standoff, a total of 21 children were sent out, and a total of 14 adults came out. And it was on March 21st, after 7 Branch Davidian adults came out. That evening is when a special agent in charge, as described in Gary Messner's book, started playing irritating and high decibel sounds toward the Branch Davidians remaining in the residence. And you've already described how the negotiators reacted to that tactic. Do you have anything else you want to say about that, or have you pretty much covered it?
No, I think I pretty much covered it. I mean, the behavioral scientists, from my understanding, were they were kind of debating one way or the other on whether to do that or not. And then they also, I think it was during that period of time of playing the music and the sounds and the noises, that they also discussed erecting a fence around the whole place and just packing everything up and leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of different things going on during that period of time being discussed about different tactics, but all of the tactics that we were aware of that they were intending to use was for the purpose of trying to get Koresh to be on the phone more. The reason behind the playing of the sounds and the noise, which counterproductive or not, the reasoning behind it was to keep him from getting any rest, because he would just hang up the phone and refuse to talk to anybody, period, because he's going to get some sleep. The idea behind that was, if we can keep him on the phone talking with negotiators, then we can keep things moving forward, because nobody else is going to make any decisions but him. So was it a bad tactic? Yes. Was it a tactic that was used for what they felt like at the time to be something necessary to try to keep him in communication with us? I think there's some merit to that, but did it work against them? Absolutely. I think it worked against the entire law enforcement group effort. So in hindsight, was it a bad decision? Yes. Was the motivation behind it, was there any merit to it? Somewhat, yes. There was an effort, because everything had shown us up to that point in time that only Koresh was the person that was the decision maker. Nobody else would make any decisions to do anything, even Snyder. And that actually led into efforts on our part to separate the relationship that Snyder had with Koresh and separate him from Koresh as best we could, because we felt like that a number of people in there would follow Snyder's advice if we could get them to break. but I don't know whether we ever got any crack there or not. He pretty much did everything that Koresh told him to. I think there was speculation that on the day of the fire that Snyder was the one that stuck the gun in Koresh's face and pulled the trigger. So I don't know what his motivation was for that, whether he was getting some sense of personal relief from the fact that his wife was now with Koresh or what, but that's just pure speculation based on human nature in general. So he
Yeah,
may have been totally off base with that.
yeah,
That being one of the
it
theories
is.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, it's one theory.
right.
So, as a police officer from Austin, did you learn that Dick Rogers, the commander of the hostage rescue team, had developed a plan to insert CS gas into the building? And if you did learn that, what did you learn and how did you learn about it?
I didn't know about the gas plant at all. I don't know when that gas plan was drawn up. Um, gas is always a consideration, but generally gas is used for one of two reasons, and that is you've exhausted all of your capabilities, and you have a tactical disadvantage on things continuing as they are. So you try to insert gas to get people to leave a building. And then another use for it is to move people in a particular direction, such as something's going on outside and it's a dangerous situation and you can't get them to comply. Otherwise, then you'll put gas in that particular area just to make that area basically off limits. So there's some different uses for gas during a standoff situation like that. But in this particular case, I was not privy to any of the discussions about a gas plant at all, or the implementation of it, when it was going to take place, any of the discussions between the field commander there and the command staff there in Washington, D.C. or anything else. So I'm not going to be of much help with you on that.
Okay, that's fine.
Other than I can give you my personal opinion about their gas plan.
Well, please do. What's your personal opinion of it?
Well, most of the time that we were there, Waco is, especially where the compound was, is a wide open area. There's not a lot of wind blocks where you have anything to slow the wind down. And during that time, there were several storms that came through. And anytime the storms were coming through, I mean, I don't know if you know that much about Texas, but when you have a storm in Texas, it's usually very quick and it's very ferocious. And so when you have a gas plan and you know that the building that you're planning on inserting gas in is made out of matchsticks, more or less, or toothpicks, more or less, then you have to be aware of the weather conditions. You have to be aware of the wind situation, because basically what happened there in their initial insertion of gas, as they were punching some holes to put gas in, is they created a ventilation system because they had wind that was blowing. I forget how fast the wind was blowing that day, but it's pretty high winds. And the wind is flushing a lot of that gas as they're putting in. It's flushing it right back out. So the effectiveness from the beginning was not great. Then they revised their approach to things as they were going along. And then apparently they had a plan B, that if they started receiving fire from inside, they were going to more aggressively insert gas and punch holes in the building I think the intention, at least as it was explained to me later on, the intention was to create exit points. But I don't know if that was more of a contributing factor to the demise, or whether they in fact did create exit points and nobody used them. But whatever.
Actually, one of
Go
them
ahead.
was used. Yeah, one was used. The hole
Yeah.
in the chapel. Several men came out of that hole that was punched in the
Yeah.
wall. But are you saying that the holes punched into the walls at different points created that wind flow, which once the fire started would have increased? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, what I'm referring to is two separate issues, and the first issue is with the wind blowing the way it was blowing.
Mhm.
Then trying to get a concentration of gas to stay inside of the building to force people out of there would be very difficult, because you're punching holes to do insertion in opposite sides of the building, and depending upon whether there was anything to slow that wind down once it came through those holes inside the building is going to push that gas out. And I think to some degree, that's exactly what happened. Now, on your point about once the fire started, did that wind contribute to it? Oh, I'm sure it created inferno. Uh, they were not, they didn't predict that it was going to be a fire burning people in the building down. Uh, the way it ended up happening, they did have some level of expectation that there was a possibility that a fire would take place, because they had fire equipment on standby a long ways away from the building. But that's pretty much what you do anyway in every type of standoff like that, is you have fire and medics, fire apparatus and medics stand by in a staging area just in case. So I don't know that they were, I think they really were caught with their, but totally by surprise about the fire. And I think that they bought into the repeated promises that that was not in any way in their plan at all, was to start a fire, or because there had been some, I think Brad Branch and one or more of the other guys, when they came out, they had a strong smell of petroleum on their hands and stuff when they came out. So they knew there was petroleum in there. They didn't know how much. Um, and they knew that there was a possibility of that petroleum being used, but they didn't. That's why they kept asking us to ask them, whoever we were talking to on the phone, and as many of them as we could talk to on the phone, throw out those questions. Is there anything that y'all are thinking about that involves fire, or different things like that? And of course, there's always denial. And then those questions were also run by those that had been in there before, and that were no longer in there, either through that standoff or had been in there prior to everything going bad, as to whether or not there was that intent. And the general consensus was that they had no intention to commit suicide, which that would be suicide. But there again, it's a matter of perspective. So,
Yeah,
and
they did have care. Excuse me, go ahead.
we know the end result. So,
Yeah, yes, we do. They had kerosene in the building. They were using kerosene lanterns. But yeah, Graham Craddock testified that he saw somebody pouring fuel at some point on that day, April 19th. So.
right. And there also was testimony to the listening devices in there, that they were hearing people saying, pour the fuel, and at least one time light the fire. So, and somebody else said don't pour the fuel there. So I'm not sure exactly what the plan was there, but there seems to be there was some confusion on that part of it from inside there as well.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Do you want to express your views about the Branch Davidians who stayed inside?
who stayed inside?
Mhm.
It's kind of a roller coaster of emotions there. And as time has passed, um, and I've come to understand a little bit more about the thought processes, it's probably softened the anger a little bit. But was I angry about it? Yeah, I was very angry about it because I, at the time, and he's a grown man now, but at the time, my son was he would have been about between almost 6 years old, um, and I very much related to those children as a parent myself, um, and so you know you can talk to me all day long about religious beliefs and religious conviction and the belief in the afterlife and all of that. And more power to you. I don't have any use for you anymore. And I'm talking about people that that will sacrifice everything because God put you here for a reason. It wasn't to kill yourself in the name of God. And we can argue that point and debate that point all day long. I understand that for years to come. But this is my belief, and I have a strong conviction in my belief. So we'll put it at that. My belief is, as a parent, you were here, and you became a parent to protect that child and their life here on this earth, to get the most and the best out of their lifetime here on this earth. And from my perspective and my belief and God is that God put us here for a reason, and God tests us the entire time that we are in this life to determine um, our worthiness. And if you believe that your responsibility is to teach a child um, your religious beliefs and your beliefs in this life and the afterlife, and you believe that this life is not important, what's more important is the afterlife, um, to the point that you're willing to sacrifice your children for those beliefs, then you don't need to be a parent. And that's my opinion. And there is nothing in this world that would cause me not to do everything I can to protect the life of my child and anybody else's children for that matter. I did 33 years of criminal law enforcement in which I was always willing, although I would prefer not to, I was always willing to step in front of danger to protect other people I didn't even know and sacrifice my own life if necessary. And I'm not pounding my chest when I say that. That's just the way it is. You don't go into this work if you're not willing to do what you need to do to protect people. And so if I'm willing to sacrifice my own life for a complete stranger, you can imagine what I will do for my own child or my family. So I just have a hard time. I really struggle with a parent that's willing to sacrifice their child based on the teachings of another person. And that's exactly what he was, another person. And in my opinion, he was and still is a false prophet. Um, and that makes me very angry to see those children sacrificed. It may, and that's my word. Okay. And I understand their perspective. Don't misunderstand me here.
No.
I understand what they're thinking. But in my opinion, and from my perspective, their thoughts were wrong because they took their children's lives. They may or may not have done it at their own hands. That's debatable as to who you think lit that fire. But the fact that they left those children in that position to begin with and didn't walk out of there with those children, they did it. That's my opinion of those people that died inside there. They did it. Now, does that make me hate those people inside? No. They had all many different reasons of their own, of themselves. Each and every one had their own individual reasons for being where they were, seeking answers to the questions that they had, and seeking whatever their personal goals were. That's their deal, and that's okay. I understand that. But at some point in time, as I said, regardless of your beliefs, you were put there as a parent. You were given a child, which some people can't even have. And you should do everything you can to make that life of that child as full as you possibly can. And they didn't do that. I don't care what the reasons behind it were, they didn't do that. And so if there's, why does God even give us the ability to have children if we're just going to sacrifice them for every fool that comes along that preaches? Now, has it changed me? Yes. I don't trust anybody that preaches, period. Don't trust anybody. Can I grow to like someone that is as a man or woman of the cloth? Yes, I can. But I won't trust them. And I would never do something immoral, illegal, etc., based on their word or advice. So let's go back over that just a little bit as it pertains to those people that were inside that compound. Mm-hmm. You can come up with all kinds of excuses all day long that you want to as to reason why you believe that it's okay for your life to end for a belief. But there is nothing that you can convince me that gives you the authority in the eyes of God to violate man's law, because the Bible says otherwise. The Bible says that you will not violate man's law. And it very specifically makes it clear that man's rules, as long as they are not in conflict with God's rules, are to be followed. And in fact, there's some indication in the Bible that law enforcement officers are put on this earth at the hand of God to do the job that they do. So there again, it depends on your beliefs and your belief system. But am I still angry? I'm not so much angry at all of the people that died in there, because in my opinion, they died for a foolish person. And so therefore they were foolish in following that person. But I'm very angry at David Koresh, because David Koresh did the things that he did in many ways for selfish reasons. And he was able to get a lot of people to follow him and do some things that they otherwise would not have found themselves doing, because in the name of religion and in the name of God. And that's why we have the Jim Joneses, and we have the whoever the leader was of the the purple group that was waiting for the meteor to,
That was Marshall Applewhite. Yes.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. When are we going to learn? You know, there's been so many of them throughout history. When are we going to learn to question and never ever go to the point that some of these people have led people to do? Are we ever going to learn? I mean, look at what's. I mean, we can say it's in the name of religion and in the name of God and the afterlife, but what's the difference between David Koresh and Adolf Hitler? They influenced a lot of people to do a lot of things, some a lot worse than others. But was it something that God would want them to do on this earth in this life? No. I can absolutely say that God would not want David Koresh to have sex with underage children. And I can absolutely say that God would not want David Koresh to take up arms and teach people to kill and take up manufacture explosives to teach people to kill. No, I don't see that. I see that to be an interpretation of the Bible, but I think you and I have discussed this before. The Bible has been interpreted many times for centuries by man. And in some cases, that interpretation was done under the influence of a substance. So the Bible is a guideline, and it is a device to teach people a concept or an idea of what God's words and what God's intentions were. Is it a book that we can interpret any way we want to and do anything we want to do because we interpret it that way? No, it's not. Never has been. And some people do. They take the words in the book that have been written by other men, and they use those words to manipulate people for their own self needs, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Their own ego. So no, he's not coming back. I don't care what other people think. He's not coming back. And the only people that he has harmed are those that were willing to follow him to the end. And the thing that concerns me more than anything else is some of the things that I read being posted on that the Branch Davidian Survivors Facebook page. There are a lot of people that are constantly talking about taking up arms, not only against the government, but against each other, because they don't like someone who is running the property out there, or they don't like somebody that likes that person that's running the property out there. So what are we doing? Are we going? We're going to do round 2 or round 3 or?
Well, I sincerely hope not, but I just want to mention that I'm on that Facebook page too, and I know, and that's where we met. But the people who make those unfortunate posts and hot-headed posts are not the survivors. They're people who consider themselves to be friends of the survivors. But so I want to make that distinction.
It sounds a whole lot like how David Koresh became David Koresh and got started, doesn't it? He got a following, and pretty soon he grew with power and grew that following. And the next thing you know, here we are. There are some people that are on that Facebook page that are not Branch Davidians, but want to be very badly. And they want to be in a position where they can develop a following. So that concerns me a lot. So I don't have a solution. The only thing I can do is try to, as we said, with our mentioning the Wizard of Oz, is pull the curtain open and expose the wizard behind the curtain. That's all I can do. And I try to do that from time to time when I'm not getting too angry about it.
Well, thank you for sharing all your thoughts, and I appreciate that. I've got another scenario I want to ask you about during the siege, and you played a role in it. And I want to describe it here for a moment. So research by scholars such as Kenneth Newport and myself has shown that Koresh was teaching that if he and members of the group would be martyred, they would be killed during the week-long Jewish holiday of Passover. In 1993, the Branch Davidians observed Passover from April 5th through April 13th. The Branch Davidians were not martyred during that week, although the FBI continued blasting high decibel sounds toward them during that period. On April 14th, the day after Passover concluded, David Koresh had someone in the group write down a letter on his behalf in which he told FBI agents that after he wrote his little book, and that's a quote, which he described as a commentary on the seven seals of the book of Revelation, he would come out to be taken into custody. According to the FBI major event log, when David Koresh's attorney, Dick DeGuerin, and Steve Schneider's attorney, Jack Zimmerman, called into the residence to speak with Koresh and Schneider on April 14th, and this occurred from 10:21 a.m. to 11:32 a.m., the two attorneys were told that Koresh would write his manuscript on the seven seals of Revelation and then come out. Koresh anticipated spending 2 days composing commentary on each of the seven seals. Koresh said that after the manuscript was placed in safekeeping with Bible scholars J. Philip Arnold and James Tabor, Koresh's waiting period would be over and he would come out. And the attorneys conveyed this information to the FBI agents. The major event log records that at 12:50 p.m., FBI agent Byron Sage conveyed information about this new development, including Koresh's exit plan, to FBI officials in SIOC, the Strategic Information and Operations Center in the Hoover Building. The negotiators were expecting that later that day, Koresh and Schneider would send out a package containing their signed contracts to retain DeGuerin and Zimmerman, respectively, as their attorneys. Later that day, on April 14th, you were involved in picking up the package of materials that were sent out by David Koresh. The major event log says that the package was brought out by a Branch Davidian man at 6:45 p.m. The major event log states that the package contained Koresh's letter, which had been read over the phone to attorney Dick DeGuerin earlier that day. And I presume negotiators listened in on that. And the package also contained Koresh's signed contract to retain DeGuerin as his defense attorney. So what did you do in order to go pick up the package, and what did the package contain? And how did you and FBI agents react to the materials in the package?
Well, first of all, for clarification, anytime that they spoke using our communication system, with the attorneys spoke to any of the Branch Davidians inside, we did not listen to it. As a matter of fact, we made sure that everything that we could listen to was shut down, and even the devices that were placed inside that were listening devices, the people that were staffing that listening process were instructed to step away and not listen to any of the attorney-client communication. And they were pretty adamant about that. So I believe that in fact was done all the way across the board. So we had no idea, other than what Dick DeGuerin or Jack Zimmerman would tell us, what took place in those conversations. And I don't know where the major event log got the information that we knew in advance that that packet was going to contain legal contracts, because I didn't know that. And I was not told that by anyone that asked me to go with one of the FBI agents up there to pick that up and bring it back to the command center. I was told uh, that Dick DeGuerin had advised them that there was some writings that Koresh wanted him to present to us, and that was in that packet. And so that's what that was all about. So when the Branch Davidians brought that packet outside of the house, that was delivered to members of the HRT who brought it back to the Tactical Operations Center that was in the inner perimeter. And so myself and one of the FBI agents went to the forward site there and picked up that packet and brought it back to handing it to Dick DeGuerin at the command post. And Dick DeGuerin, I can remember very specifically him taking that packet, opening it up, and handing a letter that was written by Koresh or whoever he had write it for him. But there was nothing in that we hadn't already seen. But then what Dick DeGuerin did was he told Jack Zimmerman, and he kind of had this little snide expression on his face. He said, "Come here, I want to show you this." And so Zimmerman went over, and Dick didn't show it to anybody else, but he just showed it to Jack to take a look at what the rest of the paperwork was inside. So I had no idea what it was. And I don't know of anybody else in that room that had any idea what he was looking at. We didn't know what was in there. To my knowledge, nobody other than they knew what was in there until later on next morning when we had Steve Snyder on the phone. And Steve Snyder said, "Did y'all get the paperwork?" And we acknowledged that we had. And he said, "Well, I didn't sign mine." And I said, "What?" And the negotiator was on the phone with him. So "You didn't sign your what?" And he said, they just wanted too much money. I can't afford that. So David signed his for DeGuerin, but I didn't sign mine for Zimmerman because they wanted $500,000. And I don't have that. And I know they were talking about, book deals and all that stuff, but there's no real way that I know that I would have that. And so he said, so I didn't sign it. So that told us that what DeGuerin had done was he sent HRT members into a very dangerous situation to pick up his legal contract. Now, whether he had already told anybody with the FBI beforehand that was part of the deal, I don't know. But I don't think so, because nobody said anything about his having us picking up his legal contract. That just wasn't discussed at all. And so that's why it was a surprise to everyone when Snyder said what he said about at least everybody in the room that I was in, which was the Negotiator Operations Center. And so I think that in a lot of ways, that kind of made everybody a little skeptical of the attorneys and whether or not they could be believed about things. So that's what's kind of surprising to me, that there's some indication that anybody with the FBI knew anything about those contracts being in there. And I'm not sure what they did. That major event log may have been documented after the fact, but I don't know of anybody, and I don't know of any reason why they wouldn't have told us if they knew about it when they sent us up there to get it. So you got me.
Well, yeah, so you're correct. David Koresh sent out his signed contract to retain the services of Dick DeGuerin, and that's absolutely correct. Steve Schneider did not send his. He did send his the next day, and both of them were unhappy about the fee that was being charged. Right. What I read in the log is that they were changing that Koresh and Schneider were changing the contract somewhat before they signed it, but I haven't seen those contracts. I can't say.
And
But
it later kind of made me sick to my stomach when after this was all over with, and people had died, that Dick DeGuerin was going before the media talking about how upset he was that this had happened and that all those people's lives had been lost and all that. And I'm thinking the whole time, if he was so concerned, why was he negotiating legal contracts where he was going to get paid? Why didn't he just go pro bono and represent them, period? But he sure was taking care of himself by getting those contracts and getting us to risk agents to risk their lives to bring those contracts out to him. If he was so sad about all that, why didn't he represent them for free to begin with? Because I know there are a lot of attorneys that would have. So why didn't those two? But yet he was planning on raking in some pretty good change there, had things happen the way he was hoping they would. And I wouldn't be surprised if the contract didn't have him getting a cut of some of the movie and book deal royalties too. So
yeah.
that wouldn't surprise me at all. But I never saw the contract, so I don't know all the wording of it.
Now, the negotiation audio tapes and also the major event log revealed that on April 16th at 2:35 a.m., Koresh reported to a negotiator that he had finished composing his commentary on the first seal. And from April 16th over the next few days, Branch Davidians repeatedly asked for supplies to use with a battery-operated word processor to type up the contract. They needed to use that battery-operated word processor because the electricity was still turned off. The word processing supplies were not delivered until the evening of April 18th at 7:33 p.m. And that, of course, is the night before the CS and tank assault. Were you in Waco serving on the negotiation team on any of those days? And if yes, were you aware of the Branch Davidians' request for word processing supplies?
I can't remember the exact date that I left. I think the 19th of 1993, April 19th of 1993 was on a Monday. I believe that I had come back either on Friday or Saturday of that week, because April 19th was also my wedding anniversary. And so I can't remember the exact date that I came back. I do recall some discussion about getting some supplies into them to help continue with the writing of the manuscripts. Also, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not they were yanking our chain and just making it up and going to do the same thing that they did before. So there was a lot of doubt about that, about being legitimate, because they had had quite a bit of time from the time that there was some discussion made about that taking place. They'd had quite a bit of time to start typing up and preparing that. And one of the things that was discussed was they had indicated that they were through with the first seal. One of the things that was discussed was, as a good faith effort, would you send out what you have completed so that we can see that you, in fact, are doing what you say that you're doing, and we can continue doing what needs to be done to support you and get that done. And they refused to do that. And I don't know why they wouldn't do that, but they refused to do that. So that, once again, going back to the time before when he was supposed to come out and God said to wait, that's just another thing that raised a lot of doubt as to whether or not he was going to fulfill what he said he was going to do, or whether they're going to pull some other type of move like they did before. So I wasn't part of the discussions on the gas plan or the time frame. It was a total surprise to me on April the 19th to see that they had started the gas plan. The way I first became aware of it, to my knowledge and recollection, was my wife was working the day of our anniversary, and so I also worked the day of our anniversary, and I'd gone back to patrol, and as was my routine, there were some pretty I guess unkept police officers that would not fix their patrol car and keep it clean that I would have to drive the next day. And so I always like to, if I'm going to spend a lot of hours in a patrol car, I like to have it very clean. So I took it to the Genie Car Wash in Austin on South Lamar, which was where the city, one of the places the city had a contract with. And I had walked inside while they were cleaning up the car, and they had a little television up in the corner of the room right when you walked inside the door. And I'm being specific about this in detail because I want you to understand that I remember this very vividly. I walked in and turned to the right and looked at that TV, and I saw the activities going on, and that they had been doing the breach and the gas insertion. And then I saw it had when it started burning, and I stood there watching, hoping to see people coming out of there, and very specifically children coming out of there. And it was a very emotional time. And I don't know if I remember seeing anybody on that news story coming out of there, except maybe when Ruth Riddle came out of there and tried to go back in. I think I saw that part. And the agent, the agent tackled her to keep her from going back in. And I think the agent ended up getting some burns on their hands, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember right. But I remember that very vividly. And that was my 13th wedding anniversary. So that's all I know about that one.
Okay. And let me just mention the people who died in the fire. So 22 children, from babies to age 13, including 2 infants who were born sometime during the tank and gas assault. There were 7 teenagers, ages 14 to 19, and 47 adults. And all of these died in that fire. 9 people escaped the fire. All right, I think we've covered everything. And I've asked you how your involvement with this case has changed you, but do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
One of the reasons why I got on that Facebook page of the survivors was I have always sought answers to questions that the answers were hard to find. And that is the things, the thoughts that were in the minds of each and every one of those individuals. And so I've been back to the site numerous times. And I don't know, maybe I have demons that make me go back there to try to, again, find answers. I don't know whether demons is the right word or not, but definitely emotions. And so I joined that Facebook page because I saw where 2 of the children were on there that are now adults. And I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to see what was being said, and I wanted to learn what their thoughts and what their feelings, and more importantly, how they had coped and how they had survived. Because I knew that those children that had come out of there that survived, some without their parents, some with their parents, had been through a very difficult situation. And I wanted to know that they were okay. So that was the reason why I joined that page. I don't know that I still have those answers. I know that some of those children now have children of their own, and they look at those children from a different perspective, and that's encouraging to me, that they will protect those children. But I know I also see a lot of pain, and there's nothing I can do about that. I've tried to be as human as I can to them. And I've tried to dissuade some of the other people that are not part of the survivor, the real survivors. I've tried to dissuade them from getting to, I guess, moving too far towards creating another prophet and false prophet specifically. I'm not real happy with David Thibodeau. I think he's a fake. I think he's a liar. And I think that actually does more harm than good for those that I think are innocent that are on that page. And so that kind of angers me somewhat, but he is what he is. And I don't know him very well. I just know what I've seen written about him and what I've seen him do and say along the way. And I think same is probably true with Clive Doyle. I think he's a liar. I don't really have a very high opinion of him at all. I think he is just as much responsible for the deaths of a lot of people, a lot of children especially, as Koresh probably was in a lot of ways, because he went along with it and in fact encouraged it. So that's just my opinion. You asked me how I felt. As I said before, I don't trust any man that preaches the word of God. I will listen to them, but I don't trust them, because if I say that, but I'll say this: if I see a man who's driving, who's getting money from parishioners, that is driving a broken down car and not wearing the most expensive clothes around, then I have more tendency to trust that person than any others. But if I see some that are driving very nice, expensive cars and living in very nice houses while their parishioners are starving to death, no, don't have any time for them at all. And I can imagine where I hope someday they end up. So,
Okay. All right.
but I realize I'm being a little judgmental on that. But you asked me how I feel and how it's
Yeah.
changed me. I've become
Yeah.
a lot more judgmental about things like that.
I did ask you, and thank you for sharing. And thank you for spending so much time with me. And I appreciate your giving me this interview. And I hope we can talk again sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.